Back at the 2017 Tokyo Motor Show, Honda pulled the wraps off a really rather intriguing study that previewed a future production electric city car. It was called the Urban EV concept, and it looked amazing. I became an instant fan of its design. There was this retro-futuristic air about it that really made it stand out, and a beautiful simplicity that was just refreshing. It was obviously a reinterpretation and an homage to the first generation Civic, and according to the people who penned it, the design was meant to express the joy of lively driving as well as friendliness that inspires attachment simply and iconically, whatever that means. I really liked the aesthetic of the Urban EV. It looked like nothing else. But I was wary that, as is often the case in the automotive industry, that it would get toned down in its transition from concept to production. I was not expecting the production version, simply dubbed Honda E, to have cameras instead of mirrors, or screens spanning the entire width of the dash, or a minimalist interior fit for a premium branded car. So, has it changed? Well, yes, the fascias have been slightly altered, but not by much. The rear light clusters on the study were squarish in shape, and for production they became round. Probably the biggest change is that the car also gained two rear doors, albeit ones with hidden door handles. Inside, the entire top of the dashboard is screens, no fewer than 5. Two 6-inch displays show the feed from the rear view cameras. One is a digital gauge cluster, and another two, both 12.3-inch displays, cater for infotainment. The car sits on a dedicated EV platform not shared with any other Honda model. The motor is placed at the back and it only drives the rear wheels. The battery is a 35.5 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion pack whose usable capacity is around 28.5 kilowatt-hours, which Honda claims will take you some 222 kilometers on a full charge. What really surprised me while driving the E was just how fun and nippy it is. My tester was the more powerful advanced version with 152 horsepower and 315 Nm of torque. It sprints to 100 km per hour in 8.3 seconds, and it tops out at 145 km an hour or 90 miles an hour. As is often the case with EVs, it feels quicker than the figures suggest, especially when setting off from a standstill. So this car is part fashion accessory, part electric city car. How does it all come together?
It's brilliant, actually. Between its quirky retro styling that is present both inside and out, the super fun drive, the decent power level provided by the rear-mounted motor, the Honda E is a very lovable little car. When I first saw this car, I fell in love with its design. And when I started reading more about it, and I learned that it's built on a bespoke EV platform, that it's rear-wheel drive, and that it has an emphasis on sportiness, my interest really peaked. And now that I've been fortunate enough to get a chance to drive it, I can say I am not disappointed. This is an amazing little car. I love it to bits. For me, the driving experience is important, and in that area, the Honda E delivers plenty of excitement behind the wheel, especially for an EV. The last electric car I drove was the Mini Cooper SE, which is a converted version of the Mini. So instead of installing a gasoline burning or a diesel engine under the hood, that car had the electric motor out of the BMW i3S, and I really enjoyed it. However, this Honda E is even better, I think. It feels way more special than the Mini. The Mini is just another Mini that happens to be electric, whereas this has been designed from the onset as an electric car. As with most modern EVs that are built from the ground up to be electric vehicles, and they are not a converted version of a gas-burning vehicle, the Honda E's battery pack is located very low in the car, in the floor of the vehicle. This translates into a very low center of gravity, which allows you to really point it into turns, and you know it's going to grip and not roll excessively. It's super fun. I was expecting it to be enjoyable to drive, but it has surpassed my expectations. Honda really knows how to make fun cars, regardless of what powers them. One area where the Honda E is like other small EVs like this is in the fact that it's heavier than you expect if you compare it to a gas-burning vehicle. The car weighs around 1,550 kilos, but you don't really feel it because there's plenty of grip, so it doesn't feel like it wants to push wide in corners. This may also come as a result of fitting the car with grippy Michelin Pilot Sport 4 tires, which are not the usual thing you expect to see on an EV, and they probably negatively affect this car's range. Speaking of range, Honda's estimation of this vehicle's one-charge range, based on the WLTP test cycle, is 222 kilometers. My tester is the advanced model that gets a lot more kit, and it also gets larger and nicer looking 17-inch wheels. But these drop the range to 210 kilometers. When I picked the car up from Honda, its battery was charged up to 97%, and the range meter showed around 180 kilometers. And that was based on an average consumption of around 18.2 kilowatts per 100 kilometers. However, with me at the wheel, the consumption quickly jumped to 20 kilowatts per 100 kilometers, maybe even more than 20. So in my hands, in the city, driven with not too much care for the efficiency, I would probably expect to see somewhere around 150 kilometers range in the real world. This is quite a bit less than rivals from Renault, like the Renault Zoe, or the Peugeot E208 and its sister model, the Opel e-Corsa, or Corsa E. The so-so range comes courtesy of a 35-ish kilowatt-hour battery pack whose usable capacity is actually just under 29 kilowatt hours. So it's not that big. It's comparable to the aforementioned Mini Cooper SE. But what it lacks in terms of range, it more than makes up for when it comes to fun factor. Now, even though this car is quite a digital thing, Honda has somehow managed to make it feel analog. Maybe that also has something to do with the way the interior is styled, like a 1990s Japanese sound system with this simple pane of wood here, or wood-like plastic. But it does a good job of fooling you. I'm pretty sure it's plastic. And the analog feel extends further. The steering is really rather sharp. The response to input of the go pedal is also immediate, as you would expect from an EV. And these, plus the enjoyable driving experience, contribute to this old school feeling. Honda has clearly summoned the energy of some old school hot hatches in this car. And it is absolutely brilliant. I genuinely love it to bits. It's such a fun car. It's so fun that I could almost forgive the so-so range it provides. But at least it charges relatively quickly. Its peak charging capacity is 50 kilowatts. And if you gain access to a 50 kilowatt charger, that will bring the battery up by 80% in 30 minutes. If you use like a 7.7 kilowatt wall box, you will replenish the battery in around 4, maybe 5 hours. What's also noteworthy about this battery pack, and it's a feature that some of its rivals like the Renault Zoe don't have, is the fact that it has thermal management for the battery. So it has systems to keep it either cool or warm depending on outside conditions. This should extend battery longevity with fewer worries about affecting its capacity, because as you know, batteries lose capacity over time, especially if you fast charge them. Regarding its design, I think it's the most successful retro-inspired car ever made. From a visual standpoint, I enjoy looking at it. I think it's very pretty. And proof of its aesthetic draw is the fact that it attracts so many looks. Like, I'm sure it would make people who wouldn't necessarily look at cars give it a second glance. It is very well screwed together. The panel gaps are perfect. and it just looks like a premium product, which it is. This is the world's first production car that gets cameras instead of mirrors as standard. Audi also offers a similar solution, but it is optional, and the screens are mounted a bit too low on the door. Here, they're mounted high on the dash, in line with the other screens, which we'll get to in a second, and they are placed almost where you'd expect to look at the mirrors, only more inward. So you don't have to look down at them, which I think was kind of a problem with the Audi e-tron. And what's interesting about these cameras instead of mirrors is that I was expecting them to be a gimmick, that they were done just for the sake of being done and being different and being techy and modern and whatever. However, I think they are genuinely useful. You can change their angle so you can look around. They have relatively high quality cameras, and even at night, when the cameras bump up the ISO and there is some noise, you can still discern pretty much anything that's behind you, especially if it has its lights on, obviously. The advanced model also gets a rear view camera, which you can activate by pulling on this toggle under the mirror. It also has brightness settings, and you can also change its angle to make it show you exactly what you want to see, so that's pretty good. For the first day or so that I drove the car, I kept it off because I just couldn't get used to it. But now, after living with the car for a bit longer, I actually found it quite useful. My main gripe with it was that it was a bit too zoomed in, but actually it's fine. It's totally fine. The location of the charge port is also rather special. It is located in the middle of the hood up front, and you can open it either via a button on the key, a dedicated button, or a small button on the faux grille. I just love the design of the dashboard, because I think the 90s Japanese stereo theme, or late 80s, 90s Japanese stereo theme is continued with all the buttons. Thankfully, even in a car as minimalist as this, you are not asked to adjust the climate settings through a touchscreen. You have physical buttons that are so retro and so pretty, and they feel very, very premium too, both to the touch and the way they click. I'm a sucker for nice clicks, and this one is quite a nice click. Feels expensive, which it should be because the car is expensive, but we'll get to that soon. Below the climate controls, where you would expect the center console to extend downward, there is nothing. There's just free space. This is where you find the USB ports, the HDMI port, or you can dry your hair because there's also a 230 volt electrical outlet. The steering wheel appears to be lifted straight from the Jazz that I drove a few weeks back. It's not particularly special, but I liked it in the Jazz and I like it here. Maybe I was expecting something more bespoke, but Honda didn't need to make something more bespoke because I guess this is fine. I don't mind it. So aside from the climate controls here, you also have buttons for the gear selection, or, well, it's not the gear selection. You tell the car if you want to go forward, if you want to put it in neutral, reverse, or park. So these buttons are located on a kind of a protruding console kind of thing that's also finished in the same faux wood, high quality faux wood. And behind these buttons you have the drive mode selector, the electric parking brake, and the brake hold button. These are all nice. The drive, neutral, reverse, and park buttons took a bit of getting used to, but after a few days, quicker than I expected, they became second nature. The only negative thing I can say about this car's interior is that I don't like the lack of an armrest. I need an armrest. I just want to rest my arm on it, as its name suggests, which is such an enjoyable thing to do over long journeys. Honda has instead opted to have these configurable spaces here, which might double as cup holders, I can't tell. And you can slide this bit out and move it front or back. Another very, very cool feature is the turning circle. You can literally turn on a dime. I think the turning circle is just over 9 meters, 9.2 if I remember correctly. and it enables you to maneuver this car in very tight spaces with ease. It is apparently one of the reasons why Honda chose to make this car rear-wheel drive. Another thing I like about being in the Honda E is the premium feel you get all around. And what's interesting is that Honda didn't achieve this premium feel with soft touch plastics. In fact, there are none in this car. This is hard, this is hard, this is hard, pretty much everything is hard plastic. But being a Honda, everything is impeccably screwed together, really. It's faultlessly assembled. And the manufacturer has somehow managed to draw attention away from the cheap-feeling plastics. Well, they don't look cheap, they only feel cheap-ish when you touch them, but they do feel sturdy. The places you touch, like the steering wheel, the doors, they are all nice and pleasant. The doors are covered in this two-tone fabric, which is very nice, with contrasting brown stitching that matches the brown seat belts, which I think are extremely stylish. I don't think I've seen brown seat belts in a car, but they are awesome. And the same fabric that is used on the lower parts of the door cards is also used on the seats, which are very soft to the touch and very pleasant and very comfortable. Traveling on board this car is a very enjoyable experience, and there's definitely a sense of occasion about it, which is odd because it's a small city car. So even though the last EV that I drove, the Mini Cooper SE, felt like a hot hatch because it was based on the Mini that was already a hot hatch, and they just swapped out ICE for electric, this car feels also very hot hatchish. Maybe even more so than the Mini. I think this is more fun than the Mini, although the Mini is more wild because you can disable traction control. And in this, I didn't find a button for that. Now I'm cruising at highway speeds, and what is worth noting is that even though this car is limited to 145 kilometers per hour or 90 miles an hour, it pulls very strongly all the way to the limit. This car feels effortless whenever you decide to put your foot down. So now I'm doing 80 kilometers an hour, put my foot down, this guy cuts me off. Gonna just give me some space. So 75 now, put my foot down, and that's 100. Super quick. Honda claims that this car can sprint to 100 kilometers per hour in around 8.2 or 8.3 seconds, and it feels every bit as fast as that. And for nipping in and around traffic in town, it's perfect. You honestly wouldn't even need to have a more powerful vehicle, because it would probably use the juice in the battery even quicker. To sum things up, I absolutely adore this car. I love it. As a driving enthusiast, I enjoy the sharp handling, the decent kick from the motor, and just the aesthetic of it, both outside and in. It's a very special place to be. It feels like an occasion to drive. It's just really special. I like it a lot. Its only problem is the price. This particular example is like 40,000 euros. Sure, you can get some money back from your government, which in Romania is like almost 10,000 euros. So it's a 30,000 euro car if you manage to get that money off. But it's still quite expensive. There are certainly EVs out there for the price with more range and probably a bit more practicality, because since this has the motor in the back, trunk space is rather limited. It's just over 170 liters, which extends to nearly 900 with the rear seats folded flat. It is fairly practical, but it's not the most practical. There are more practical alternatives out there. Yet you are not buying this car as a practical proposition. You are buying it because you enjoy it, and you know you will enjoy it. It is also not especially refined at high speed. This might be a byproduct of using sporty tires instead of quieter, low rolling resistance tires. But then again, I can't argue against Michelin Pilot Sport 4s on an EV. So even though I think it's a bit expensive, and there are better practical propositions out there, I think this is a thoroughly recommendable car for the right person, for the right Honda fan, and I'm a fan of the Honda brand, so I would buy this in a heartbeat.